Hi there, folks. Thank you for joining us for this laboratory update for April 2023 for the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy. April was another big month. We have had tons of progress over here. In fact, we've been working on an enormous project for drtomcowan.com. I'm not really at liberty to discuss all of the details, but I can say that we've been working on a 5-gallon project for them and also on a 3-gallon project for them. The project is not ready and not ready to release quite yet, but if you want to stay tuned to all of their updates, please just visit drtomcowan.com, and in the bottom left-hand side of that website, you will be able to sign up for their newsletter list, and I am sure that they will be announcing the release of these products as soon as they're ready. We are very excited for them, but like I said, I haven't cleared it with them that I can talk too much about it, so just stay up to date on their website. We also finished the final filtration and bottling of 95 new Spagyric tinctures. That is more than we have ever cranked out in a certain period of time. We've been working on these since like November. It's an enormous amount of projects, but this essentially means that there are going to be a bunch of new products that are hitting the shelves, and we will also have Spajirics of the Month releases very soon, posted for 12 plus months out on our website. So it's an enormous undertaking. This is the biggest tincturing push that we've ever done. Every single one of these were astronomically, or shall I say astronomologically produced. And we did this in such huge and vast numbers for a number of reasons. One, we had herbs on our shelf that needed to be worked on so that we could get the most prime potency out of them. But two, there have been projects that have been building up in my mind for 10 years now. Many of them over the past 3 years have just continuously been put on the back burner, these research projects, because they aren't things that are going to produce any funding for us. And again, we can't be spending our time doing things unless we have funds coming in order to be able to fund those things. Otherwise, we'd be destitute. We wouldn't be able to pay our workers and so on and so forth. So this has been an enormous push. Tons of hours have gone into this, active hours, passive hours, in order to get us to this point so that we have tons of releases, our shelves are well stocked, and we have tons of new things that are slated to release. 5 new Spagyric tinctures every single month for over a year. It's going to be really quite a fantastic thing. It takes a huge load off of our shoulders and frees up a lot of lab space now that those are finished. We are just in the process of labeling them, and you'll probably see an email coming around soon saying that dozens of new tinctures are actually hitting the shelves. And these are ones that are going to be like limited batch things where we don't have enough to put them into our Spajirics of the Month rotation and other types of things like this. That's why they'll be hitting the shelves immediately. Or things that were one-off things that we could only get once, like for instance, my very dear friend and colleagues, dear friends and colleagues, Dr. Karina Lopez and also Saki Samu. They live in Greece, but they came and traveled to Karina's a place where Karina has roots in Puerto Rico, and they were able to get like poleo and guanabana leaves and all these things and ship them to us fresh so that we could low temperature dehydrate them to our specifications and immediately begin extractions on them. So things like that, we don't have regular access to high quality stuff where we can trust the quality and integrity of how they were grown and harvested and so on and so forth. So things like that are going to immediately hit the shelves, whereas other things that we have reliable sourcing for, those will be the things that are more inside of the 5 Spagyric releases of the Spajirics of the Month. And I'm telling you, just because we have reliable access to them does not devalue them in any way. They are exceptional. Every single one of these I have hand sourced and selected myself because of the sustainability, the ethics, the astro harvest, the rare and unique ingredients that are going into these things. So every single one of these are outstanding and exceptional. And these 95 that were finished were actually part of a larger group of about 145. Some of those have already hit our to-be released shelves. And you haven't seen them yet because I've been waiting on all of these to get done so that every single month we can have like a root, a flower, a fruit, a leaf, And then sometimes there are also resins too that will be able to go out inside of these things. So we're trying to make the Spajirics of the month as awesome and as diverse. And I will also be planning these out so that like in the springtime or in the wintertime, for instance, springtime we need a lot more cleansing herbs. Those 5 releases will be those types of cleansing herbs that we need for liver and for lymph and for kidneys and so on and so forth. Whereas in the wintertime, usually we need a lot more immune support and so on and so forth. So I'm creating these things very consciously so that we have the best releases and they're not just kind of, we never tried to do them just random, but they will be less random, let's say, and they will have a lot more thought and care put into them. So like I said, we're just creating labels right now, and then all of those will be listed probably by mid to late May. You can expect to see that on our website, and so keep an eye out for all of that. We also worked the elixir salts for all 95 of these as well. After over 3 years, well, I've been researching this for over 15 years, but the last 3 years I've been professionally researching how to be able to create elixirs, and we finally decided that it is not cost effective for us to be able to produce elixirs. There are ways of doing it that are cost effective. We would need to have some bigger equipment, a bigger facility space. Like we would have to increase our funding pretty substantially in order to be able to bring these things to market. And simultaneously, the other issue about that is that they are produced in such small quantities typically that the price tag is very high. And without enormous education on behalf of the people purchasing these things, it's not really sustainable and would just take up a lot of shelf space for us. And again, having a facility of a particular size and having limited shelf space, we can't just be stocking things that are going to be sitting around for 15, 20, 30 years. The other problem is that if they were liquids, we would have to store them. If they were powders, they wouldn't take up that much space. But then the measuring of micrograms is very difficult, and we can't necessarily, without putting them into tablets with other fillers or putting them into capsules with other fillers, we can't really bring these things to market in any way. I'm not interested in stocking a ton of bulk fillers or buying encapsulation equipment or tablet compressing equipment. Or other things at this time, especially because that requires ingredients like maltodextrin and magnesium stearate and a lot of the things that you see in other capsules, vegetable glycerin, things that I don't necessarily put my stamp of approval on in terms of things that I think that are healthy to consume on a regular basis, and they're not things that I want to be able to store and work on. So even though Spajiric elixirs are fantastic and they are the item of Spajiric pharmacopoeia that are perhaps the most like pharmaceutical medicines in that they are produced as a powdered liquid that is water soluble, that can be compressed, that is time released inside of the body. Like they are very, very potent. We just cannot find a sustainable way at the present moment of bringing those things to market without overcoming some hurdles that kind of cross barriers ethically and health-wise that I'm not really interested in doing at the present moment. So we've scratched our entire elixir production line. We have an enormous amount of tinctures in one big massive elixir that we might actually sell as for talismanic purposes, because there are over 365 herbs in there now, the elixirs of those, and that's been a personal spiritual project for me that goes back to the Irish legends of Airmich and her brother Miach, which were sons of Giancecht. And so for me, as part of a spiritual tradition, it has been an ongoing thing that I have done in order to create this, and I actually call it the grave of Miach, which is basically Miach dies, his sister Airmich cries over his grave, and from his grave spring 365 of all of the healing herbs of the entire planet. And Giancecht, his father, kind of in you could say a jealous rage, ends up spreading those out so that only Airmich herself knows all of those herbs and all of their healing qualities after Miach himself is dead. And so, yeah, it's been a huge project to have over 365 different elixirs in one mega macro elixir. It smells amazing. There's all sorts of really unique characteristics to it. I've loved doing it, and we have so much of it that there's a good chance I'll be able to share some of it for talismanic purposes. I wouldn't consider eating it. There are plenty of poisonous plants like mandrake and datura and lots and lots and lots of other plants besides that. So it's not something that I would ever recommend for consumption. But for talismanic purposes, it carries the potency of all of these plants with their sulfur, their mercury, and their salt all perfectly conjoined and put together in a very cool and water-soluble form at that. So keep an eye out for that, because that will probably release in the next couple of months. I got to take a look at like various little bottles and necklace things and rings and amulets and things like that we can put them into that make them really cool and awesome. But it's a beautiful way of carrying plant medicine. You know, when we talk about like a medicine bag or other things, this is an alchemical version of that you can wear on your body to harness the energetic components of these plants just inside of your intrinsic data field, your aura, however you want to talk about that. So yeah, that's that. We also started a new 5-gallon batch of lemon peel Spagyric tincture. Of course, when we do our limited batch runs of Spagirizomal vitamin C, our lemon peel Spagyric tincture is one of the 4 ingredients that goes into that. So we started a brand new batch of that with some really high quality lemon peel. It's still macerating right now. At some point during the month of May, that's going to get filtered, have salts added to it. Probably by the second to last week, or maybe last week of May, we plan on having that finished up and ready to go for a production run of a June batch of Spagirizomal vitamin C. And again, we try to produce these things right around the solstices and the equinoxes. And we have to stop shipping the Spagirizomal product because it needs to be refrigerated and stay cold. It needs to stay below about 33 degrees Celsius. And much of the country, especially the shipping vehicles, get way above 33 degrees Celsius when we're shipping this product out during the summer. So we always pause our shipping on Spagirizomal vitamin C from June 21st, the summer solstice, until fall equinox. And so we are going to have an early June release of a limited batch again of 50 bottles of Spagirizomal vitamin C. If you want to be put on the wait list immediately, then go ahead and reach out to Rebecca at support@phoenixaurelius.org. She will put you on the wait list and we will notify you first before we put any quantity of bottles online. You will have approximately 24 to 48 hours to respond to that email once we have it made and released. Before we can no longer like really hold it for you, we're going to have to put it onto the website and give everybody a chance to get it, because it is one of our most popular products, and people were absolutely pissed actually that we stopped producing it regularly. But it was because we stopped producing it regularly that we were able to do things like work on 130 tinctures and finish 95 of them and get going on other research projects, which I know those of you who are buying our products won't recognize the importance of this work until probably months or years down the road from now. But once I'm able to show these split test things, it will advance the entire scientific approach to Spagyria so massively. And remember that that's what I'm in this for. I am trying to standardize Spagyric education and production, not just in the laboratory, but also the theories, the philosophies, the cosmologies, etc., and being able to show what actually works by integrating modern technologies as well as integrating Spagyric approaches to our modern ways of thinking. So I'm not just taking modern sciences and injecting it into Spagyria, I'm taking Spagyria and injecting that into our modern ways of looking at things as well. It's like both things are coming together and creating a new thing, and that is what we do here at the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy. And it's very, very important and critical that this research goes on and that it gets funded, and the purchase of all of the things that you guys buy just helps us to do that. So, you know, we appreciate your support, but we can't be doing things just for production. Otherwise, we never actually end up achieving our goals. So it's very important to remember that. Speaking of research, I've continued with yet another deep dive, and by that I mean like it's just like diving in the ocean. Sometimes your tank is going to run low and you have to come back up, you have to get a breath, you have to, you know, take a look at whatever you just collected, analyze it, and then go back out to sea with new fresh tanks and dive again, try and find things. So I just did another deep dive into solar geomagnetic anomalies, which henceforth in this video I'm just going to call SGMA, and Schumann resonance anomalies, which we're just going to call SRA. SGMA and SRA are known scientifically to cause a wide number of different complications, health conditions, symptoms in people. And that's not just my research. My research definitely corroborates that. But this is the research of prestigious health universities and research scientists all over the world. And in fact, there have been in repetitive studies, at least 4 or 5 studies that I can point to just off the top of my head, there are about 39 to 40% of the population that are affected in some physiological and or psychological manner by SGMA and SRAs, especially the fluxions of the Schumann resonance or the SR. We can see that there are like consistent, regular fluctuations of people's emotions, of their tiredness, of different things like melatonin hormone being produced, fluctuations of sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, etc. And it goes way beyond that too. Those are just some of the things that kind of immediately come to mind. But in an additional 4, technically 3.8 to 4% of the population, strong solar flares, which are part of SGMA, solar geomagnetic anomalies, and or Schumann resonance anomalies that result from the solar flares are shown to be correlated to myocardial infarction and other heart-based diseases through the mechanism of mineral ion flux. And so every cell and different areas inside of our body, we have calcium ions, we have chloride ions, we have sodium ions, we have potassium ions, and they're typically voltage regulated, meaning that they depend upon a very consistent frequency inside of the body and outside of the body too, in order to work right. If you're exposed to EMF fields or ELFs, extra low frequencies, like the Schumann resonance is an extra low frequency in ELF, those impact the way that these voltage regulated mineral ion channels work inside of our body. And it is thought that there is what we call calcium ion flux that occurs most frequently during Schumann resonance and during solar flare anomalies in this at least 4% of the population that's been studied. That causes myocardial infarctions, which is a heart attack. It also causes other different things corresponding to the cardiopulmonary system, but specifically the cardiovascular system, by tightening blood vessels and increasing blood pressure massively. It also increases the chances of stroke and epilepsy and a number of other diseases that can result from that type of constriction based on these voltage regulated calcium ion channels. So with that being said, I have a client that is very sensitive to these things that I have been able to track now for multiple years, how this individual responds to various fluctuations of SRA and SGMAs. This individual tends to present conditions pertaining to extremely dangerously high blood pressure, like 210 over 98 or higher blood pressure. And a couple of other psychological conditions along with physiological feelings too, like pains in certain areas of the body under the rib cages and so on and so forth. And so I was able to come up with an IDF approach to test mineral ion channel IDF balancing broadcasts to see if that would help the conditions. And there was a very significant decrease in the conditions during the severe SGMA and SRA events that we had during the early days in the month of April. April was a very active month in general. We had a couple of SR blackouts, Schumann resonance blackouts. We had very long extended periods of some whiteout times as well, which is where the amplitude, which is basically volume, got like cranked way high. And so we were able to significantly reduce the intensity of these things, such to the degree that blood pressure fluctuations may have been minor, but nothing of concern where it usually is. And in fact, in order to keep this individual alive, bleeding the fingertips and the ears, which is a traditional Chinese medicine technique, has been employed in order to help to drive down that blood pressure during these events. And that's been the only relief this individual has actually had. So being able to come up with another solution that can help to manage these conditions for this individual is vastly important to their very survival. And so Yeah, that was a very successful thing, and it was used multiple times throughout the month of April. Anytime that there was a severe SRA or SGMA event, we were able to preventatively know when those things are going to happen, especially because they happen pretty concomitantly with coronal mass ejections, which we know about. We can predict those based on sunspots and which sunspots are facing the Earth. And so we can usually predict those within a couple of days. And by the time satellites are picking up on those SGMA events, especially coronal mass ejections, we have about 20 to 30 minutes of notification that I'm able to get through a notification that I use with spaceweatheralerts.com. So I have some time to put together a broadcast protocol for this individual and run it. So that's been very effective, and I'm hoping that the research that I do with this individual will lead me to finding other individuals down the road. I don't have time to take on too many clients. I only have like a very special number of cases that I work on regularly because they're things that are very important or research that remains unfinished for me that I need to study. So that's that. I also worked on a Spajiric formulation that could help, and showed that it could possibly work by altering various neurotransmitters in particular. This formulation initially, as I made it, had all of the ingredients kind of blended together in a way that I just was like, oh, I need this amount of this and this amount of this. There's never any IDF work done. I created this formulation first in 2014 or 2015 to help with bipolarity, which it did show extreme promise for. That being said, it was actually used in a number of cases. In fact, in order to treat a client that presented with hypokalemia and hypoglycemia caused from a serotonin syndrome back in 2017. So I have tested this formula for many things over the years, but it was not in our apothecary more recently. In fact, we ran out some year and a half or so ago, and we just haven't had more of it. So I was able to take some pre-made Spagyric tinctures that we had in the laboratory already in our apothecary and blend them all up in very particular ratios in order to create a trial batch to give to the same individual who was presenting with conditions of extremely high blood pressure during SGMA and SRAs. And this formulation shows a lot of promise. The only problem is in its blended form, where we take different finished Spagyric tinctures and combine them together, what ends up happening is that you have to take 5 to 7 milliliters at a time, several times a day. Now, anybody who's even sprayed, 5 to 7 sprays of a Spagyric tincture and kept them under the tongue for a while, you know that, like, especially the first few times that you do that, your tongue gets raw. Well, taking in that much alcohol, taking in, and keeping it under the tongue for a significant quantity of time, it makes the entire mouth kind of chalky and raw for a few days, and it's just not pleasant to have to take that quantity for very often. So what I did was I hit the intrinsic data field investigation and performed an IDF investigation to find all of the materials, what forms they need to be in, like whether dried, fresh, freeze-dried, etc., and in what quantities per what percentage of, what quantity of alcohol and what percentage of alcohol and so on and so forth. It was probably the most in-depth analysis that I've ever done. We also knew, because of my colleague Richard Kirby, that in 2017 we had tested this particular formula needs to be created when the moon is in a waxing phase at precisely 31 degrees Leo, and ideally that will, for those of you who are astronomological, when we hear moon in Leo waxing phase, that automatically means a fruit day. So it's got to be a fruit day waxing phase. This was also, traditional Gregorian, I guess, Beltane Eve, right, on the verge of the beginning of summer there. So fantastic batch has been started. This batch has not been finished yet. It is still currently macerating. There's, probably 2 or 3 weeks before it will be finished. So we don't know the results of that, but I will talk about that once I have some data on that down the line, probably in our next laboratory update or two. So that has taken up an enormous amount of my attention and research time here at the Academy this month. Also, we took a spring break during the second week of April. I had initially intended to record a lot of Alchemiculture podcast episodes, but there were a lot of other necessities that kind of came up during that time, much more pressing obligations, the least of which not being tax preparations. And also, we had some financial applications that demanded my time at our local credit union, getting things situated so that we can take a look at purchasing some very hefty and very expensive equipment. I'm not at liberty at the present moment to discuss what those things are, what that equipment is, but we were taking a look at the ability of funding that and what our financing could possibly look like in order to purchase this equipment. Let me just say that it is in excess of $180,000 in order for us to purchase this equipment, and so it's something that needs financing. Either that, or we need a group, like a fundraising capacity, like a Kickstarter, GoFundMe, something like that. But I wanted to take a look at what our financing options were first, so that any group funding, crowdfunding type of campaign that we have is not necessarily so overwhelmingly burdened by a huge number and requires so much work. So in future weeks, future months probably, we'll be deciding whether we really want to branch out into this area where we'll need this equipment, and if so, what other types of facilities we need. There's still a lot of different pieces of the puzzle that we need to get together in order to determine whether this is something that we can sustainably branch out into, or whether the requirements on us by way of space and electricity and so on and so forth are going to be way too vast for us to make this a sustainable thing. But that took a lot more time than what I thought, and so the recording of the Alchemiculture podcast has been postponed. I'm sorry for those of you who are very interested in that podcast. We constantly get people writing in being like, oh, we're so excited for you to be doing this again, and they saw our first episode of this season with Wolf, and the response has been overwhelming. So thank you guys for tuning in, and know that it is my intention to record more podcasts. In fact, I have one that I want to record very, very soon, maybe even this weekend, talking about transhumanism and AI and various other topics, and its relationship to alchemy, as well as a more sustainable alchemical approach to consciousness and technology and human intelligence, and how we can advance and utilize our human intelligence to solve these problems that AI is otherwise coming into, which from my perspective are entirely unnecessary. So I will save more of my narrative for that video, but just keep an eye out for that, because that will be one of the topics that we release very soon. And finally, we were able to run a 50% off Spagyric sale. The weather warmed up here right around the last week of April. We had our last snowstorm, or at least, going to cross our fingers and say it's our last snowstorm. As of right now, there is green grass, the trees are blooming. It's an absolutely beautiful time. Summer is here. Here in our bioregion, there was over 6 solid months of very cold, dark, harsh winter. So we are absolutely loving the greenery. We're absolutely loving, seeing rain instead of snow, and the warmer temperatures that have arrived. But that also heralds the time of year where we're able to hold our Spagyric sale. So just in the week that we did the Spagyric sale, over 15 gallons were sold, and they've either already been shipped or they will be shipping out very soon and are on their way out the door. So you guys definitely took advantage of that sale. That makes us very happy. Like we say all the time, like if there's only one product that we had to reduce all of our apothecary down to, it would still be that product. We love it. We know that you love it by the response to these types of sales, and just like it's how fast it generally moves anyway. So thank you again for your support. I think that's pretty much it for the month of April. I know that this has been a pretty long video anyway. Hopefully it was interesting to you guys. Thank you always for all of your support, your financial contributions, for funding our research, the things that we're engaged in and that we have planned for the next 6 months to 12 months right now are going to help to standardize the education, especially of the laboratory procedures of making various spagyric remedies and items of pharmacopoeia. And so we can continue to use all of your financial support. If you like our products, please get them out there to other people, share them with other people, let them know, what the differences are between Spagyric tinctures and herbal tinctures. And if you want me to make a video about that so it makes it easier for you to turn them on to those things, please just let us know whatever it is that we have to do. Also, our affiliate program is set up in such a way now that if you have any sort of group that you want to share our products with, we now have an awesome back end for all of our affiliates, and we have just instilled a new program where all of our affiliates will be notified 1 week before any of our upcoming sales so that you have time to create the custom product links and whatever else to be able to get out to your network and let them know that not only can they get a discount, but all of their purchases also give you a substantial percentage of those products in order to help spread our mission and get our work out there. And of course, we planted tons and tons of trees, cleaned up tons of plastic bottles this month, and sequestered a lot of CO2 with all of your orders as well. So the ecological impact that you're having is enormous, in addition to the wellness impact that you're having, as well as funding us. It's a win-win-win situation, and we want to continue to promote this as much as possible. So thank you so much for all of your support. If there's anything that we can do for you, or if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at support@phoenixaurelius.org, and we'll see you guys next month. Thanks again.